Welcome to this re-recording of our budget prep webinar. We had a few technical difficulties when we ran the webinar and our recording didn't turn out quite like we'd wanted it to. So we are currently re-recording the core parts of what we went over during the actual webinar process. So if you attended live, you probably got a little more than what you'll see in this recording. If you didn't attend live, we're going to go over the exact same content that we went over on Thursday, with the difference being no live audience and no guests this time, but the core content is still going to be the same. So let's dive right in and get started here. A high level overview of our agenda for the webinar. We're going to do an introduction and overview. We'll do a quick recap of the budget prep timeline, a couple of just key things that you'll need to remember. These are all pieces of information from the state, so you're probably already aware of those, but we'll just do a quick recap and kind of talk about where we're at in that timeline. Then we'll dive right into the meat of the webinar today, which is going to be getting into the I2M software, where we'll talk about creating a budget prep, editing a budget prep, printing and finalizing your budget prep, and then during the live webinar, we spent some time with some Q&A. We won't do that in this re-recorded version, and then we'll wrap up our time together. However, before we begin, I've talked to so many of you on the phone. I thought it might be helpful if I shared a little bit about myself and who I am. It's probably helpful to put a face to the voice that you've heard on the phone. And it's also helpful just to get to know one another a little bit better. So a little bit about me. My wife, Shelly, and I have been married for 18 years. We have two teenage daughters. And I've spent the last 12 years or so either working for schools or working in the ed tech software industry. And during that time, I've been really fortunate. I've supported some of the largest schools in the US with various softwares, and I've actually supported kind of everything in between. Everything from the small charter schools all the way up to some of the largest city school districts in the United States. As far as my hobbies go, I really love reading. You can't see it behind me, but in my office here, I have several shelves that are filled with books. And I actually have a library just outside my office where I own somewhere in the realm of 300 books. And I usually read about 100 books per year. It's just something that I really, really enjoy doing. My second love is barbecue. I love making and eating barbecue. It's one of my absolute favorite hobbies. I've got a smoker that sits on my front porch, and just about every day I'm running that thing trying to cook something up on the grill. And here's a picture of myself and my family. This was during the solar eclipse that happened about a month ago. We got those solar glasses and we decided to try to take a selfie. And if you've never worn those glasses, you literally can't see anything except for when you're looking at the sun. And so I took the picture and then afterwards realized that I cut my wife completely out, but you can kind of see her chihuahua there in the bottom corner. So that's me and my two daughters. So anyway, that's a little bit about me, and look forward to getting to know you all a little better as we get started in this series of webinars that we're planning on holding. So let's talk a little bit about budget prep timeline. And again, this is all information that comes from the state. These are things that you're probably all aware of and already know about, but sometimes it's helpful just to have a little reminder of what you need to be doing and when you need to be doing it. So the first thing in the budget prep timeline is the budget hearing notice. This is no later than April 30th, so hopefully you've already done this where you've notified the county clerks of the date and location of your budget hearing. And just an important note here, this does not apply to charter schools. So if you're a charter school, this is not something that you need to be doing or worrying about. Everyone else, though, your budget hearing notice, you should have already done that. Next on the list here, we have the publish your budget hearing notice. So you've notified the county clerk. You need to publish that budget hearing notice, and it should be published 10 days prior to the actual budget hearing. After that, you've set the budget hearing. Now it's time to present and adopt the budget. So This is no later than 28 days prior to your July meeting. You need to hold the public budget hearing to present the budget for the fiscal year, and then that budget needs to be adopted either at that public hearing or at a special meeting no later than 14 days after the public hearing. From there, you will notify the SDE 21 days or less after you adopt that budget. You need to submit a signed copy of your budget packet to SDE or no later than July 15th. And then finally, you need to post that budget online. So your approved annual budget needs to be posted on your district or charter school website within 30 days after its approval. So we're really in the present and adopt phase, which is where we'll focus our time now as we jump into the software, where we'll talk about creating a budget preparation, how you can edit that budget preparation, and what you can do to share it with the folks that you need to share it with. So first on our list here is create your budget prep. And I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Budget Manager now. And just a couple of notes here. We're primarily going to be focusing on the Postgres version of the software, but almost all of the functionality is the same if you're using the older CISAM version. And if you don't know what that means, you're probably running the Postgres version. Those that don't run Postgres, they're usually aware of the fact that they're on the older non-database driven version. Just a side note here, if you want to convert to Postgres, I am here and available, and I can help you walk through it in about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how your school's computers and servers are set up. I highly recommend it. There's some pretty cool new features that are available that make your life as a business manager a little bit easier. And where there's differing functionality, I'll try to do my best to call those things out so that you're aware of whether or not it exists if you happen to be on that older version. All right, so we're looking at Budget Manager here, and we're getting ready to create a budget preparation or a budget proposal. And the very first thing that you want to do here is you want to add your new accounts. Before you even begin to dive into the budget preparation module, the first thing that you should be doing is adding any new accounts that you're aware of. And the reason being is that you can't add accounts to your budget preparation until you've created the accounts in Budget Manager. So step one, as you have a list of accounts that are going to be used in this new fiscal year, go ahead and take the time to add those via the accounts module. So inside of Budget Manager, you'll come up here to Accounts, and you'll just click Add and fill out all of the information that you need to fill out in order to add those accounts. And the reason that you want to do this first is it's just going to make your life a little bit easier as you create your budget prep and you need to add those accounts and get the amounts budgeted for those accounts. So that's your first step. Create your new accounts. That way it's easier to add them to your budget prep. And then you don't have to jump back and forth between the accounts module and the budget prep module as you need those things added. So from here, we need to create a new budget proposal for the new fiscal year. And we need to get to the budget preparation module. You can do that in one of two ways. You can either click the budget prep button here on the left side of the screen, or you can actually go up here to other functions and click on budget preparation. Either way is going to get you to the same exact space. Now, when you get to this screen here, the first thing you're going to see is a dialog box that asks you to select a budget prep number. You actually don't need to do this because you don't need to open anything. We're actually just creating something brand new. So when you see this screen, go ahead and click Cancel. Now that you've clicked Cancel on that select dialog box, you can jump up to the menu here at the top of the budget prep window and click Create. And when you get to the Create Budget Preparation window, there's a couple of options on here that are pretty handy, and I'll walk you through some of the things that you can do on this particular screen. Typically, you can use the default settings here. So when you look at the functions here, you actually have 3 different functions available to you. And this is one of the areas where Postgres will differ from CISAM. If you're on the older version, you're only going to have 2 options here. You're actually not going to have this third copy new accounts functionality. That said, normally you're going to create a new budget prep from your current report format or your current budget report that you have set up. And the reason you're going to do this is you often want to copy the data from your current budget, the budgeted amount for the current fiscal year, the year-to-date activity for that particular budget account, and then you also want a column for the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. So generally speaking, you can leave this as the default settings, which are create from a report format. It's going to automatically default to report format number one, which is usually your current budget. And then you can select what you want the columns, the three different columns amounts to be. Again, generally you'll use the defaults where it'll be year-to-date activity, budgeted amount, and then 0, or the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. But if you wanted to, you could swap these around in any order that you want. Just know that you are limited to those three options: 0, budgeted amount, and year-to-date activity. So the only real changes that you'd probably make here are the order that the columns are in, not necessarily the amounts. So we'll leave those as the default. The next part of creating a budget prep is entering a budget prep number. Now, you can have up to 99 different budget preps, so you can enter a number anywhere between 1 and 99. I'm not sure why you might need 99 budget preps, but it's completely possible, and you can enter any number in that particular range. Now, if you do enter a number that's already been used, Budget Manager is going to let you know that, hey, this one's already in use, and it's going to ask you if you want to overwrite that data. So you want to be careful. It's not going to do anything unless you confirm that you want it to proceed, but just be aware of the fact that if you choose a number that's already been used, Budget Manager is going to give you a window that says, hey, are you really positive that this is what you want? And I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that now. So I'll just enter the number 1 here because I know that's in use. I'll click create, and you'll see this dialog box here that says budget prep number 1 already exists. Overwrite it, and then you choose yes or no. Now, just a word of caution here. If you choose yes, Budget Manager is going to do exactly what it says it's going to do, and it is going to overwrite whatever data is in budget prep number 1 or whatever number is already in use. So be very careful and incredibly thoughtful about whether or not you need to save the data that's in that budget prep, or if it's okay for you to delete it. Because once you select yes, the data that's in there is gone forever. So just be really, really careful. If you're not sure, just select no, and you'll have the ability to select a different budget prep number. So again, use a numbering system that makes sense for you. And in this case, I'll just pop in a random number. I'll click create, and it's going to create the budget prep file here. All right, so you've created your new budget prep. One piece of advice that I've been really harping on to everyone is rename your budget preps. When I look at the budget data that people send to me, I often see something like this where it's just budget prep 1, budget prep 15, and on down the list. And I don't know about you, but it is incredibly difficult for me to remember what these might be. I've seen some people try to use the number as like the fiscal year. So, 20 budget prep 24 might be fiscal year 24. We actually have a function that makes this much, much easier. Instead of you needing to remember what a budget prep is, you can actually just give it a name that's descriptive and useful and makes your life a little bit easier. So after you've created your budget prep, you can come up to the menu here at the top of the screen, and you can click rename. And with this tool, you can give your budget prep literally any name that you want. But if you call this budget fiscal year 25, that's going to be a lot easier for you to remember than budget prep number 05. If you're amending a budget, you could call it amended budget fiscal year 24, because again, it's much, much easier to remember. And not only is it easier for you to remember, it's a lot easier for me when you send me your data for me to figure out what you're working on. If I'm able to go to budget prep fiscal year 25 without having to dig through 10 different budget preps that aren't renamed, That makes it much easier for me to figure out what you're working on. And it makes support go that much faster because I don't have to spend a lot of time digging in, or I don't have to spend a lot of time back and forth with emailing questions and that type of thing. So would highly, highly encourage you to create your budget prep and then immediately rename it to something that's descriptive and useful and helpful to you as a business manager so that it's easy for you to remember what's what. So take advantage of that rename function. Now, let's talk about editing your budget prep. And before we get too deep into editing a budget prep, one of the things I really want to spend some time on are the line controls for the budget prep. And now, all of this is copied directly from your report format. So all of these lines that you see here in your budget preparation, the line controls are copied directly from the report format. So if you've worked with the report format, you'll recognize these when I pull them up. But it's also helpful to kind of understand what those line controls are doing. And I'm going to go ahead and just click edit here. And we're going to look at really just this bottom section here. You have the account number, of course, which is self-explanatory. The description is pulled from the description in the accounts module. The amounts, of course, are just the amounts for your budget. But the part that I really want to look at here is this bottom set of drop downs. And these are what we're calling line controls. And these are what control basically the format of the printed report. And it also controls how the budget prep module is going to calculate all of your totals and subtotals. So print, of course, is yes or no. That's whether or not you want the line to print on the piece of paper when you print a physical copy of the report. The lines are the number of lines you want to print after the current line. So this allows you to give your budget prep printed version some space in between the different things that are going to be printing so that everything's not just bunched up. So in the example that I've got here on the screen, after the printer prints this line here, this total revenue line, it's actually going to jump to a brand new page. So again, it's much easier to read and scan and look through a list of, potentially hundreds of different accounts. Description only is exactly what it says. Do you want to print only the description, or do you want to print everything on the line, the account number, the description, plus all the amounts? The add is, do you want the value in this line, the cash amounts, do you want these to add to your totals? Yes or no? And then we have the total level, which is, we'll talk about in just a second. And then you have an underline, which is, do you want to print an underline for this particular line? You have no underline, single underline, and double underline. Now, let's talk about the total levels very, very quickly. Probably one of the more complicated aspects of the report format and the budget prep module, but I'll show you an example that I think will help you understand just a little bit of what's going on. The main thing to understand here is that you have 9 different levels when it comes to the total. And what that means is that when you enter a value in one of these cells, and then you say add it to the total, and then you specify the total level, it tells the program how many times to save that particular value. And I'm going to pull up a help article that I built to help illustrate with an example that's a little more simple than looking at a couple hundred lines in a budget prep. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up that help article now. Okay, I've got this help article, and this is actually about editing your budget prep. And one of the sections here talks about the line controls. And specifically, I've got this table built out to help explain the total levels. So I've really simplified this and with an example related to salaries and something that you might already be doing in your budget prep or in your budget report. Sometimes you want to look at, elementary salaries, middle school salaries, high school salaries. You want to have subtotals for each different school type. And then you might want to actually have a total for all of your schools. So this is functionally how the total levels work. So in this example, we've got an elementary teacher salary, some elementary aide salaries, and the total level for each is 0. So here's what happens when you set this up. You say elementary teacher salary, $100, add this to the total level. So add would be set to yes. And then you say the total level is 0. And what this functionally does is it saves the number 100 all the way up the total level stack. So every number from 0 to 9 now is saved as a 100. Then we add an elementary aide salary of another $100. We say add is yes, total level is 0, and it says take this $100, add it to the previous $100, and save it 9 different times so that we can use that total in various different ways. And now we have another line, which is total elementary. It's $200, but this time we set the total level to 4. And what this does is it zeroes out levels 1 through 4. So if we were to use level 1 at this point, it would be $0, but it stores the $200 in levels 5 through 7, right? And if we continue kind of down the line here of adding different amounts to the total levels, we can see that a middle school salary of $100, it's added to total level 0. And remember, levels 1 through 4 have been cleared out. So now levels 1 through 4 are stored as $100, but levels 5 through 7 are $300. And so again, this is one of the more complicated concepts when it comes to the line controls in your budget prep and in the report format. But I would highly encourage you to kind of look over the simple example and really, take some time to kind of wrap your head around this concept, because you can do some incredibly powerful things with totals and subtotals. And the fact that you can store the totals across, 9 different layers makes this an incredibly powerful aspect when it comes to editing your budget prep. Now that we've talked about the various different line controls that you have available to you, let's jump back over to Budget Manager. And let me give you a pro tip to make your life a little bit easier when it comes to adding lines to your budget prep. Because one of the things that you're probably going to be doing if you added new accounts, you're going to add new lines. And the way that you do that is you select a line and then you click Insert. And before we go any further, it's really important for you to understand that new lines are added below the currently selected line. So if I were to jump up to this elementary textbooks line, and then I were to click Insert, and I were to add a new account here, the new line would be added below elementary textbooks. Now, let me jump to the tip that I think will make your life much, much easier. I don't know about you, but I find it next to impossible to remember not only all the various different account numbers that are necessary for the report format and the budget preparation, but we also have all of those different headings which require an account number in order to be placed on the budget prep report. I can't remember all of those things. So let me show you a way to make your life a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of the budget prep module, and I'm going to pull up the accounts module. And what you want to do here is immediately just click on print from the budget account screen and then click on report. Now, this is where you can really use this to your advantage to give yourself a list of accounts that perhaps you can't remember or you don't want to have to remember. And the best example that I can show you is give yourself a list of the various heading accounts that you use for totals and subtotals and blank spaces and all of that. And again, I can't remember the account numbers for all of these things, but this tool here, this report, allows you to filter the report based on any number of criteria that you enter into beginning and ending account. So as an example, if I wanted to find all of the heading accounts, I could change the first number in here to H for the beginning account. You can leave everything else as a 0, and I'll change the first letter to H in the ending account, and I'll just go ahead and print this to the screen. And you can see when I print this to the screen, now all I have in this list are all of my various heading accounts. And as your budget grows, you're probably going to have a large number of these, and you may or may not remember what they are. This is a way that you can generate a list of just the heading accounts. And of course, you don't necessarily need to print this to your screen. You could actually, print this as a physical piece of paper that you keep next to you as you're working on your budget. The other thing that you can do is print this as a PDF. You can use Microsoft Print to PDF, and you can save this as a PDF file that you can open up and Adobe Acrobat or whatever your program you use to read PDFs. And you can do this for really any type of accounts. For instance, say you wanted to get a list of all your accounts that start with 100. You could type in 100 for the first 3 starting numbers, and this will filter your accounts to just things that start with the number 100. And as you can see here, if I were to scroll all the way to the bottom, it only gives me a list of things that start with the number 100. So this is an incredibly powerful way for you to get a list of accounts that perhaps you may not be able to remember, but if you have a printed copy next to you, it's much, much easier to add those things onto your budget prep because you don't have to jump back and forth between accounts and budget prep trying to remember what the account number is. You can just have your printed piece of paper or your PDF open on another screen, and you can just easily add those to the budget prep. So again, you can get to that by going to Accounts, then you go to Print, then you go to Report, and you can use the filters in here to give yourself a specific list of accounts that you want to be able to easily reference either in a printed copy or in PDF form. Now, let me go ahead and jump back over to budget preparation. And before we go any further, I do want to call out, if you're amending your budget, a really good thing that you can do here, you can also use the rename function to rename your columns. So for an amended budget, it may be something like year-to-date activity, fiscal year 24, and then fiscal year 24 amended. Again, you can give these any names that you want. Just do whatever makes the most sense for your particular situation. Now, let's talk about the move amounts function, because really you probably don't want to have to scroll through hundreds of accounts and manually type all of your data into your budget prep. You're certainly able and welcome to do something like that, but the move amounts function is probably your best bet to getting a really fast start to your budget preparation. And one of the things that you can do here is move data from one column to another column. And really, when you think about it, the mental model is really more of a copy and paste. It's not actually moving the data, it's copying and from one column and pasting it into another column. So a really good practice to get started on your budget prep is a lot of your budget accounts, the amount budgeted is probably not going to change from this current fiscal year to the next fiscal year. The move amounts function will allow you to copy the current budgeted amount from your current budget to the proposed budget column. And then from there, you only need to go down and edit things that are changing with your accounts or add data for the new accounts that are being added for the next fiscal year. So here's how you would do that. First, you would go again to move amounts. And when you get to the move amounts window, you want to choose option number 3, which is move amounts from one column to another column. And again, you want to think about this as a copy and paste mechanism rather than a move mechanism. So once you select number 3, it opens up some options down below. And what you can do here is you say, I want to move from, or I want to copy this column. So in this case, I want to copy my current budget, and then I want to paste it to, or move it to, a different column. And in this case, I want to move it to my proposed budget. So again, option number 3, make sure you select the correct columns from these drop downs, and then you click move. it's going to say move amounts complete, and you'll notice that everything changes in the proposed budget column. It's a really great way to get yourself moving much, much faster. And instead of, again, scrolling through hundreds of lines of accounts, you can give yourself a really quick baseline to start from, and you can just spend time focusing on editing the things that are changing or adding data to the new accounts that are being added for the year. Move amounts is incredibly powerful, and it has lots of options, and all of them do exactly what they say they're going to do. So these various options are pretty self-explanatory. They copy, they paste, and a few other situations. You can zero things out, but highly encourage you to use the move amounts function versus starting from scratch and having to spend a bunch of time manually editing. Now, one of the questions that I have seen a few times pop up over the last few weeks is, can you export the data from your budget prep out of Budget Manager and into something like Excel? The short answer is yes, you absolutely can export the data into an Excel spreadsheet. You come up here to print and report. You have the option to print your budget prep to a CSV file. And you can open it up in Excel. You can manipulate the data to your heart's content, and that would work just fine. The second part of the question is, can you then pull that data back into Budget Manager? You've done a bunch of work in Excel. Can you pull that work back into Budget Manager? And that's an emphatic no. That's not something that's currently available. So you're more than welcome, of course, to pull the data out, export it to Excel, do whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, you're going to come into the budget prep module, and you're going to have to go through line by line and edit the data in order to get it back into Budget Manager. So just be aware of, if you are working in Excel, there is no native function that's going to allow you to pull that data back into Budget Manager, but it is doable. So that's about the move amounts function. One other thing that I want to really highlight is the details function. So the details function allows you to add extra information to any line in your budget preparation. And a really great example of that is perhaps you want to list all of the various reasons why your salary amount is going to be what it is. So I'm going to go ahead and select this teacher salary section, and I'm going to come down here to this details button. And when I click on details, it's going to pop up this screen that's blank. And what this allows you to do is enter a description, an amount, and the number of units for this thing that should be added as a detail to this particular line in your budget. And here's a really good example of how you might use something like this. Let's just say I have some teachers, and we know that we're going to pay them $40,000, and we know that there's 5 of those folks. And we also know that we're going to pay a bonus of $1,000 to all of these teachers. And I'm going to fix this. I'm gonna do 5. So we've got 5 teachers at $40,000. We've got 5 bonuses at $1,000. And you can see that it gives you a total down here at the bottom. And if you click save, you'll notice that my proposed budgeted amount changed to $41,000. And so you can use this details button to add information to literally any line and any column in your budget preparation. And so this is really useful when you want to explain or give additional information to your board or whoever's looking over the budget as to why an amount is set to what it is. So for example, if an amount is going significantly higher, you can use details to explain why it's going higher. If something's reducing, you can use, again, details to explain why the amount is what the amount is. And also, you can print this information directly onto the budget proposal when you go to print it. So this is an incredibly useful tool that allows you to add information that maybe doesn't need to be visible on a line by line basis, but there's might be things that you want to break down into, you know, more specific information for folks to look over. So again, you select a line and a column, you click on details, and then you can add a description, a dollar amount, and the number of units that you want to have for that particular thing. And I've seen people do this for salaries. I've seen people do this for custodial supplies, for office supplies, anything that you think would be useful um, for explaining um, a budget amount. So highly encourage you to use that, and I'll show you how it prints here once we get to the section about printing. Um, Outside of that, the process of editing is really you coming in here, selecting a cell that you want to edit, typing in your amount, and moving to the next cell, typing in your amount, and on down the list. Now, a couple of things that I do see that pop up somewhat frequently are your total columns. As you're editing, you'll notice that as I zero some of these out, my total column down here is not updating. The totals only update in two situations. Number one, you come down here and you click calculate. You'll notice that my total amounts changed. And the other time that your totals column update is when you click the save button. So, and you can see after zeroing a few more lines out, this updated after I saved. So if you're working on your budget and you're like, wait a minute, my totals aren't updating, the first thing that you want to do is come over here and either click the calculate button or click the save button, and that should get all of your totals updated in the way that they need to be updated. So just one of those things that if things are looking a little funky and your totals seem like they might be off, there's a good chance that you just haven't saved in a while, or you haven't pressed the calculate button recently. So give either one of those a shot, and I would encourage you probably just to push save so that if anything happens, you don't lose any of the work that you've been working on. So that's the process of editing your budget. And finally, that brings us to printing and finalizing your budget. So let's talk about the print options that are available to you. So we've worked on our budget here. Now we're ready to print this out to share with at our board meeting. So you come up here to print, and you're going to go to report, and we're going to talk about a number of options that are available to you here. And I'll also show you a couple of examples as to how this would look. So let's start by talking about these options at the top of the screen. So print control codes, that prints all of the line controls for every single line. This is not something that's going to be particularly useful to anybody but you. And if you do this, it's really more of a mechanism to help you identify, like, why is something displaying in a weird way? Why are my totals not adding up in the way that I think they should be? Instead of having to go line by line and say, okay, let me check the line controls for this line, and then, okay, let me check the line controls for this line, you can go to print the budget prep out, check the line controls, and every single line will show you the controls and what's going on. So that's handy really only for you, probably not something that you're going to add to your budget prep and share with anybody else, but really, really useful if something's not displaying correctly, something's not adding up correctly, and you want to try and figure out why that's happening, but you don't necessarily want to click every single line and figuring out what's going on. So it's a very handy tool, but probably only handy to you. The next option here is to print the line numbers. And this does exactly what it says. You have the line numbers column here on the left side of the screen. If you check this and turn it on, in your budget report, it's going to add these line numbers to the printed copy that you print out. And this may or may not be useful to you. You'll just have to make a judgment call on your part as to whether it makes sense. But I will say that if you turn this on, it's probably a lot easier as you're going through your budget and working with a bunch of different people potentially to say, hey, let's look at line number 1700 versus let's look at purchase services middle school, right? So this is a really good way if your budget prep is really long or has a lot of lines and it's hard to kind of parse down into the nitty gritty details. Add the line numbers. And that way, as you're talking amongst yourselves and you're working through the budget, you can just reference a specific line number, and it should be much, much easier for folks to actually find what you're looking at. And then finally, this last option at the top is to print the detail lines. And we just talked about this. You added all of those details to certain lines. When you check this box, it's going to print all of that detail directly into the budget proposal. It's not turned on by default. So if you want to have that detail included, you check the box, you turn it on, and you're good to go. And I'll show you what that looks like here after we get through this next section. So you actually, when you print, you have the ability to customize the order of the columns. 9 times out of 10, you'll probably use the defaults with year-to-date activity, current budget, and proposed budget. But you have the ability to either rearrange these columns in any order that makes sense for you, and you can also turn certain columns off, if that makes sense. But you can control what's printed in each column. Two of the more powerful options here are the underline for zero options. Now, by default, when you print your budget proposal, the zeros, as you can see right here on the right side of the screen, it's just going to print a bunch of zeros in those spaces. But you might actually want to have some room to pencil numbers in or some information. This is where you would check the underline for zero option. And usually you're going to do this in the proposed budget column. So if I check this option and we print the report, and again, this only works when you physically print the report. This doesn't work when you print a screen. But if we were to print this report right now, all of these different zeros, instead of printing zero, it's just going to print a line that then allows you to pencil things in. So really, really handy for actually doing the work of working on the budget with pen and paper, if that's your preferred method. The last thing I'll call out here is you can filter what things you want to print out. So perhaps you only want to work on one section of the budget at a time. You can specify a beginning line number and an end line number. Let's just say I wanted to stop at line 1500. I could just type 1500 in here, and my report's just going to print those, the lines in between 0 and 1500. So handy if you only need to work on a specific section. Now, let me go ahead and close this, and I'm going to pull up a few examples of printed reports here. So this first example is the default, no options selected. This is what you're going to get when you print the report. So it's the account number, the description, the various amounts, and then your totals. This next one is an example of adding the line numbers. So as you can see, all it does is just give you another column with the line numbers. And like I said, it might be a little easier if you add these to your report as you're working with a bunch of different folks and working with the report. It's probably a lot easier to say, hey, jump down to line 2000 than, hey, find secondary middle school textbooks. Pretty handy in that regard. The next thing that I would encourage you is related to font sizes. You can print your budget prep in portrait mode or landscape mode. I've done a little bit of testing here, and if you're in portrait mode, which is what we're looking at, you can usually get 8 or 9 point font, depending on which font you're using, which is not real big. It's probably fairly readable, but based on my testing, that's about as large as you're going to be able to make it, depending on the font, is 8 or 9 point. However, if in your print options you flip the budget report to landscape mode, you'll notice here that it's a little bigger on the screen, but also you can get your font size, 10 or 11 point font, because there's more space for the printer to print. Again, depends on the font that you're using, so you may not get exactly 10 or 11, but switching to landscape mode does allow you to increase the font size a little bit and make things a little bigger on the printed page, if that makes sense for you. Next, I'll show you what it looks like when you have some details added and you choose to print the details in your report. And I'll scroll down here, and you can see I've got an elementary teacher salary section. And then underneath, I've got a bunch of different details here. Um, and so this is what it looks like when you turn that box on. You can go ahead and say, print the details out for everything. Um, and one of the things I've done here, and this is not probably something that you would typically do, but just showing you that you can add details to any column. So I added details to this year-to-date activity column, and then I added details to the proposed budget column. You typically wouldn't add details in this way because it's probably not useful to add details to year-to-date activity or current budget. And the reason being is there's no way to squish these together. It's always going to print like this. And if we had another section of details in the current budget, you'd actually get three, different sections of details. Typically, you're probably only going to add details to your proposed budget. The assumption being that everybody probably already knows why a budgeted amount is what it is in your current budget. They probably don't know why it is what it is in your proposed budget. So just be aware that if you add multiple columns of details, it's not going to squish them together. It's going to print exactly like what you see here on the screen. And this is probably not something that you would typically do, but it's just highlighting what it's going to look like. Now, finally, I'm also going to show you what it looks like if you add some underlines. And as you can see here, these are all amounts that would have typically displayed or printed as a 0 instead of a 0. Now I've just got a blank space that I can pencil something in as I'm working through the budget. So that might be useful if you're a pen and paper type person. So that's the printing options. We'll go ahead and jump back to Budget Manager, and we'll talk about what do you do after your budget is approved. So you've done all the work, the budget has been edited, it's been presented, it's been approved. What do you need to do inside of Budget Manager? First, make yourself a backup. I cannot emphasize enough the need to back up and save your data. That way, if something funky happens and you're not happy, it's easy for you to revert your data. We have a help article in our knowledge base around backing up your data in Budget Manager. I will just call out that backing up your data is as simple as going to Other Functions, Manage Database, Export Data, and then follow the prompts. It's a really fast way for you to get a quick and dirty backup of your data that you can use and bring back into Budget Manager if something goes wrong. So number one, after your budget is approved, come in here, make yourself a backup. Number two, we're going to use the move amounts function. We need to take the data from the budgeted or the proposed budget and make it the actual budget. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to jump back one more step. And if you come up here to this create menu, we have, again, this is Postgres only. So if you're on CISIM, you won't be able to do this. But let's just say that you added a bunch of new accounts to your budget preparation. You also need to add those to the report format. Now you can go ahead and do that like you always do. You can do it manually, go into the report format, add the accounts, etc. Or if you're on the Postgres version of the software, you can use this copy new accounts to report format. It does exactly what it says it's going to do. If there are new accounts here in the budget prep module, it's going to place them in your report format in the exact location that they are here in the budget prep. And the way this works is you select this option and then you say, okay, copy from budget prep. So whatever budget prep you're working on. And again, I'll plug the rename function. It's much easier if you have descriptive names versus budget prep 1, etc. And then you say copy from budget prep to a particular report format. And again, you'll notice here that the report formats are named descriptively, so it's much easier to know what's what. Typically, it's going to be report format number 1. That's usually what you use as your current budget for your budget reports. And if you click create, it actually will just automatically copy all those accounts over to your report format, and you don't have to do any additional work. So your budget's approved, you've made your backup, you come in here to budget preparation, you click create, and then you say copy my new accounts to my report format. Really, really handy and saves you a little bit of time so you don't have to manually add them in both places. Finally, now it's time to take your proposed budget amounts and then move it over to the actual budget accounts. And the way that you do that again is you click on Move Amounts, you select option number 1, which is Move Amounts from your budget prep to the budget accounts budgeted amounts. So the main thing here is make sure you're working or have selected the correct budget prep that is for the next fiscal year, and then make sure you select the column that you want, which again is typically going to be your proposed budget column. Make sure you select that, and then you click Move. And when you do this, Budget Manager is going to take the data from the column that you chose, proposed budget, and it's going to save that to the actual budgeted accounts. So now when you go to run your budget reports, the budgeted amounts are going to be updated. So that's the process when your budget has been approved and finalized. It's make a backup, add your new accounts to the report format, and then use the Move Amounts function to copy the proposed data over to the actual data. And that is pretty much it for the webinar today. A couple final things that I'll highlight are our website, i2mfinance.com. Would highly encourage everyone to take a look at that. I'll go ahead and pull that up and show it to you very quickly. And on our website, the thing that you probably want to check out first and foremost is the support section. There's a bunch of different information on the site right now, but the support section is probably the most interesting. When you go to the support section, you've got links to our help center, which I'll show you in a second, contact information, and then this is also where you'll start coming to get your software updates. We've been working on implementing a secure share file server, and this is the easiest and fastest way for you to get access to that. We're actually already, it's already set up and working, and you can actually get the newest versions of the software directly from here. One thing I'll call out is if it's your first time accessing the new secure share file server, you need to create an account. And if you've already done this and you've already created an account, click on this existing, and it'll just allow you to log in with the credentials that you created. Finally, I will show you the knowledge base. We're regularly working on adding articles on a weekly basis. It's a little time consuming because of how thorough we're trying to be, but we have the sections broken down by product. You can also get the newest version of the PDF manuals. We're working on several series of how-to videos so that in addition to text-based stuff to help you move through the software, you're also going to have access to videos. And I'll go ahead and click on budget here, and you'll notice that everything that we talked about today in the webinar, there's a help article for all the different pieces in terms of budget prep. So if you can't remember the steps to create your budget prep, you come to the Create a New Budget Prep article, and it's got step-by-step text instructions, and it's got screenshots that kind of guide you along every step of the way. All right, well, I think that does it for our re-recording of the webinar. If you have questions or you need help with anything budget prep related or anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, give us a call, hit us up on email, and we will be happy to help. All right, have a great day, everyone.